Public servants, thought leaders, and experts from across Canada are reflecting on the ideas shaping public service, leadership, policy, governance, innovation, and beyond. This is the Review and Reflection series, produced by the Canada School of Public Service.
So today we are here with Gary Bolles, and Gary Bolles is a good friend of the Canada School of Public Service, but that's not why he's here. He's here because he's one of the most interesting people that we have at the school, and Gary has a lot of interests. One, he's an expert on kind of the future of work. Another is he's fascinated by technology and emerging technology. And then the third, he does something that Yogi Berra used to call very, very difficult. He's a futurist. And I remember one of my favorite Yogi Berra isms is, it is very, very difficult to make predictions, especially if they're about the future. So Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going.
So first off, I truly appreciate all the opportunities to be able to spend time with the amazing team here at the School of Public Service, and I've met some of the most fascinating people, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for me to be able to see how you're continually preparing the people who will lead in government in Canada in the future. I've got a variety of hats that I spin constantly, so sometimes even I have trouble keeping track of them. I have what I call a portfolio of work. So I've got a book called The Next Rules of Work. I say the mindset, skill set, and tool set to lead your organization in times of uncertainty, which I think we can all agree we're certainly living in. I'm the global fellow for transformation for a group called Singularity University, which is a global think tank, all these brainiacs about the future, different technologies, exponential technologies that are affecting our industries, our organizations, and our lives. I've got, I think it's now 10 courses on LinkedIn Learning with over 1.5 million learners. Courses like Learning Mindset, Learning Agility, which I've just updated for the age of AI. I'm rewriting 2 courses now on strategic agility and developing your future workforce in the age of AI. So the opportunity is for people to be able to see some of the ways that technology and world events are changing our world and how they can get ahead of it. Like, what are the strategies to be able to be continually relevant? And then just because there's not enough time in the day, we've also got a small but mighty software company called eParachute, which is built from the knowledge of a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which is sort of the enduring career manual, 10 million copies in print. And that is basically a methodology for how people go through life pivots, how they change careers. So you sort of munge all that together. I lecture around the world, and I have the opportunity to meet some of the most fascinating people and learn from them, and then synthesize a lot of those insights. And happily, a lot of those are government stakeholders, from Brazil to Greece and beyond.
So what are you hearing from people from Brazil and Greece? Is it a happy time? Are people having angst? Are people scared, confused?
All the above. So if you distill, I'm not trying to simplify it, but if you distill people and the way that they often think about the future, which does generate for many people a lot of anxiety. I want them to be hopeful. I want them to see all the opportunity that can come. But if you distill that, first off, I find out that while people are inspired or at least could get some vision of longer term future threads or scenarios, what they really care about is tomorrow. The future they care about is, what do I do next? So that's why I call my book The Next Rules of Work. I sort of overuse the word next in a lot of what I write and talk about. But the basic premise, first off, is that people want to see a hopeful vision for the future, but they really want information that can help them to make good life decisions. There's just some peculiar ways that our brains work, which I'm happy to talk about. A lot of the cognitive biases that we have where we over-optimize for near-term decisions and are heavily optimized for them. And the second insight I want to offer is that even though there's specific examples of the ways that technology is changing work and learning and economies and organizations. The two things that really tend to impact people the most are the pace and the scale of change. So if change moved very slowly and affected a lot of people, we would all adapt. And if change didn't affect a lot of people, but it moved very quickly, those people would be directly affected, but a lot of people would be insulated from change. And it's the pace and the scale of change. It's moving faster and faster. We've got some great examples in recent history, and it's affecting more and more people more rapidly. When ChatGPT 3.5 from OpenAI was released in November of 2022, the speed with which 2 million people were using it was about 30 days. And if we went back to the dawn of the internet, when companies like America Online had to mail CD-ROMs around and you had to install it in a CD-ROM drive, which I'm sure many young people today have never even seen. Grandpa, what's a CD-ROM drive? That would have taken probably years to get to that scale. And so it's because we've got these layers of different technology that all are on top of each other that speed the pace that people can adopt these new technologies, and the scale, more and more people are affected. And that just completely freaks out the human brain. We're not all optimized to be able to deal with the pace and scale.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people around the world right now that are worried about work. And as you mentioned, we're at a pivot point. Not the first time in human history we've worried about work. We've worried about work during globalization. We've worried about work during kind of the automation. We've worried about work when we shifted kind of from muscles to other things. Talk to us a little bit, set the stage. What is work? What is this thing that humans are obsessed with?
So I'll talk a little bit about the history of work and sort of how we as humans have used our skills and the ways that we have solved problems and created value and that sort of thing. And then we can see how that applies pretty readily right now to this environment. So first off, the Western concept of work as something we would want to do, as something we feel motivated to do, is actually very recent in human history. Martin Luther, believe it or not, the Reformation was the first wave in Western culture where Luther basically said, God wants you to work. And so that created all these ripple effects where we went from work being thought of as anathema, it's like a curse in earlier eras, to something where we felt that we were being compelled to work. And then a lot, pretty much fairly recently, within the past 100 years or so, there's been an ethos developing. Well, no, you could actually do work that actually has some satisfaction, some purpose. My father was a recovering Episcopalian priest who wrote this book, What Color's Your Parachute? And he added on an element that he thought was useful, which is it's not just that you're doing work where you get paid or work that you're doing well, like a vocation, but it's also something that you might enjoy. You might feel there's a purpose or a meaning to it. So work mechanically is just three things. It's our human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. So when we start a new business, when we start a new job, when you start a new division of a government, a new agency, there's a bunch of problems to be solved. And so we as humans, we bring our skills to perform tasks to solve those problems. Well, what's happened throughout history is that automation automates tasks. So
it's a good thing, though, isn't it?
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for certain people. It benefits certain, and then eventually it benefits more. Well, so let's just say we'll describe a brand new technology that's going to completely disrupt the work of the time, and it's called the ox-driven plow. So there's this plow, and you used to use your hands, and you probably could work just about as much as anybody else could and plant a whole bunch of seeds in a field. And then I come along and I say, well, no, actually, we're going to till the field, and we've got this piece of metal that's going to get pulled by this ox, and if you own an ox, and if you can afford a plow, then you're going to benefit. But if you can't, we've divided labor. Labor has to work for the person who owns the plow and the ox. And so the people who benefit are the ones that can own the method of production. And the people that work, what ends up happening over time is if you can't own those things, you simply can't work hard enough. You can't till enough fields to be able to match what the ox and plow can do. And so now we fast forward to technologies like generative artificial intelligence.
But let's pause there
Sure.
before we get there. So I think everybody understands work vis-a-vis income, right? But we also identify as our work. Like one of the first things when you meet somebody, like, "Oh, what do you do?" Why is it so important to humans that we have this relationship with work that seems to be, akin to the relationship with our children or with our spouses or with our community? It seems to define us in this very interesting way.
So I'm going to say, I think it's a spectrum for many people where there are some people who want to show up, do their work. It really, the only meaning they feel they get is that they can feed their families and put a roof over their head, which is great. That is just great.
That's income.
And it's income, and it's and you probably are able to leave the job at the end of the day. You don't think about it at home, and you don't define yourself necessarily by that work. And then the other end of the spectrum, your work is a significant portion of your life. You are a lawyer, you are a doctor, that's who you are as a person, and so that's rooted in your identity. And I believe everybody finds different motivations. A lot of it depends upon sort of this matching process of who you think you are, what your skills are, and then the work that you're doing. And if you feel that it's a very, very close match, you're going to develop a very strong identity. And if you feel it's less of a match, no, I've got all this stuff that I do outside of my work and the tasks I'm performing, the problems that I'm solving, it's not a deep part of me, then you're not going to be as connected to work.
Right. Because you don't do doctoring or do lawyering. You are a doctor. You are a lawyer.
But the challenge then is if that work's no longer available to you. So there's a variety of different industries, and public service is one of them, where it's almost sort of like hermetically sealed. It's got its own rules. It's sort of like mother and father. It's an environment where once you've learned the rules, they're not always as transferable into other areas. And you see the same thing in medicine. You see the same thing with teachers, ministers, military. Once you're in these institutions, these environments, then the transferability of the skills and the mindset and so on, that can sometimes be hard for people. And it's one of the reasons I mentioned my father in his book. He was a minister in San Francisco in the 1960s, and he got laid off in a budget crunch.
And ministers get laid off?
Well, there's only two ways in Episcopalian church you can get laid off. One is that you are asked to seek another flock. Oh yeah, there's a church over there you might want to go check out. And then the other is, it's a cathedral. We have a budget crunch. We just don't have as much money. Hey, I'm sorry, your services are no longer needed. So in his late 40s, he had a family of 4 kids and a wife, and unemployed for 6 months, eventually found a job, but it was helping other ministers on college campuses, and they were getting laid off. So he first wrote his book, What Colors Your Parachute, for ministers, vocation with a capital V, meaning with a capital M. And it was all about how you can take the skills you've learned, the problems that you've solved, and how they might be transferable into other environments. And so that's the challenge and opportunity with identity is, he said, well, maybe one of the ways to shift your thinking, if you're a lawyer and you can't find work as a lawyer, or you're a doctor, you can't find work as a doctor, or you just decide you want to do something different, you step back and you say, well, I'm a person who has the skills of a lawyer and the skills of a doctor. And what are those skills? Oh, it turns out many of them are completely transferable to another environment. And so it's wonderful to have that sense of rootedness and identity so long as you keep on doing the work. And if it's no longer viable for you, or it's not the kind of thing that you want to do, then shifting that identity towards the skills that you have, the problems that you can solve, is a far better way to be able to adapt.
So let's move now to the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence. So as humans, we are very, very used to machines and tools and automation kind of taking tasks away from us, and in many cases, taking work that, a lot of people don't find rewarding, and making our lives a little bit easier. And then there's a period of disruption for the people that, used to, as you put it earlier, put seeds in the ground or try to pull things out that now the ox with a tool is doing. Artificial intelligence seems different. It seems that it is the first time it is coming for things that are innately human. Talk to us a little bit about artificial intelligence and work.
So, Singularity University, one of our founders is Ray Kurzweil, and I've had many fascinating conversations with Ray, and he and many others, and I've been lecturing for decades now, that there's going to be this technology that's going to come along, and it's going to have a lot of the capacity to perform tasks that humans have done, especially when it relates to language and what we sometimes call thinking. And so the internet, when it first really took off in the mid-1990s, many of the same predictions were made. It's this new technology. It's going to connect everybody. Eventually, all work is going to be completely disrupted. One of the greatest canaries in the coal mine was journalism. I'm a recovering journalist. I used to be the editorial director for 6 different technology magazines in the 1990s. And we predicted it's going to completely wipe out traditional journalism. Well, it did, but it's taken 30 years. So about half the employment that was in journalism is gone and has evaporated in the past 30 years, but far more jobs were created in what we think of as new media, right? And if you say, well, social media marketing, that was not a thing in 1995, a whole bunch of new jobs were created. But we got to go back to pace and scale. So along comes ChatGPT 3.5, and there have been other technologies that have had certain similar capacities, but that was sort of the leap forward in the same way that the Netscape browser was a leap forward in the beginning of the internet. There's this leap forward, and suddenly then we all say, wait a minute, this is doing things I used to just associate with human beings. Now, there have been technologies that have performed some of those activities and faked people out going back 30 years. There was something called Eliza, which was one of the first chatbots, and it was done with just text and on a computer, but it actually fooled people about 30 years ago. It was not unlike a conversation with ChatGPT 3.5 today. It just wasn't as versatile. So what ends up happening is these technologists have come up with a way to be able to basically hoover up a huge amount of human knowledge, right? So just think of this big digital hoover vacuum cleaner, sucking up all this information and then throwing a bunch of algorithms at it. And then when we query it, spewing it back to us and typing it out, making it look like it's a human thinking a little bit, and then speaking back to us. But then it's performing these tasks we used to think, oh, only a human could write poetry. Only a human could generate these images. Only a human could write a book. And now we find that it's not in many cases great, but it's good enough. So it sort of fits this bar where people who might have hired freelancers before to do text writing and that sort of thing, they're probably going to outsource it now to the technology. So what happens over and over again is there's a reset period. We don't yet know what the real impact on work is. We know there's some near-term work roles where the technology is just really, really good. So customer service, for instance, a lot of customer service reps are having to either learn a higher skill set or they're going to have to shift to other work because a lot of it's going to be automated. And so we're just now figuring out what some of that work is. But it's important. There's two dynamics I want to make sure we're pointing out to people. The first is that what is different about this technology, significantly different, is that it can actually empower humans to learn new skills more rapidly, solve problems more rapidly. There's been a number of tests in different work roles. It actually empowers the less trained person more than the more trained person. And that's true in coding. That's certainly true in some of the image generation, in things like developing PowerPoint presentations and those sorts of things. It doesn't make the person who's really good at it that much better, but it makes somebody who's absolutely unschooled in it up to speed really fast. So that's the first dynamic, is these technologies will help us to do learning faster, to solve problems faster, and potentially to be able to do better paid work more rapidly. The other dynamic that's important with any technology to understand is robots and software don't take jobs. They just don't. They automate tasks, right? Human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. They're just automating those tasks. If all those tasks add up to a job, it's a human's decision, at least right now, if the job goes away. And so the companies where people are most affected are the organizations where there's skills that and tasks that are being performed that these new technologies can do. If they have a very inclusive mindset about keeping people in work and well-paid work and training them to be able to solve other problems and develop new skills, these technologies are really, really good at doing that. But if it's a company that is very shareholder driven and all it wants to do is just lay people off because it thinks it can be more efficient and make the remaining people more productive, they're going to lay people off under any circumstances.
That was actually one of the big insights I gleaned amongst many from a book, I'm sure you know, Co-Intelligence, where the author said that, you know, study after study after study has shown that AI helps the least skilled workers, the workers that most people are worried about kind of in the age of automation. Let's shift now. We've set a little bit of the frame of work. I really, really enjoy the way in your book you lay out the framework. So you talk about skill set, tool set, mindset. Why don't you walk us through each of those in any order that you would find congenial?
So let me just set the table a little bit with what the difference between them is, right? So I often say mindset, skill set, and tool set are the three legs of the stool for how each of us as individuals navigates a world of exponential change. So I wave a magic wand and you and I are standing at the foot of a mountain. And
in Greece or in Brazil?
Well, it depends. You get to choose.
Okay, I want Greece.
Okay, so we're standing at the foot of Etna, maybe?
Or Mount Olympus.
Okay, you get to pick. As I've waved the magic wand, I have given you all of the skill set of a mountain climber. So you've climbed a mountain 100 times before, every single detail of what it takes, but you look up at the top and you say, it looks too cold, looks too high. So you have all the skill set, but none of the mindset. You're not going to climb the mountain. It doesn't matter how good you are at it. You're just not prepared. And so I wave the magic wand again, and now you have all of the skill set of a mountain, or the mindset of a mountain climber, but none of the skill set. So you've never climbed a mountain before, but you look up at the top and you say, how hard could that be? So you take 1 step, 2 steps, you encounter problems. Remember, humans solve problems. And you solve them just in time and just in context. That is, you haven't gone back to get a 4-year mountain climbing degree. You've solved. Maybe you pull out your digital distraction device, your cell phone, and you look up, how do I climb a col? Or, you try to solve the problem in real time with just the limited information you need. And then eventually you reach the top of the mountain and you look down and you say, how hard was that? And you learned the skill set from climbing. So we all need a 21st century skill set, and I'm happy to talk about what I think that is. But mindset eats skill set for lunch. If you and your team are walking into a meeting and you think, we've got this, we've got the psychological diversity, we can provide the psychological safety, we're going to come up with amazing ideas, you're just as right as if you say we can't. However, if you are standing in front of an ice wall on, I don't know if ice walls are on Mount Etna, but you're standing in front of an ice wall. I don't care how good your mindset or skill set is, you need a good tool set. You've got to have the pickaxe, you've got to have the boots. And so you think of the tool set as a set of techniques and technologies empowering you to have the skill set and to be able to superpower your mindset so you can solve problems you've never encountered before. So that's why it's important, I think, to think of mindset, skill set, and tool set as being very complementary. But what we want to do is we want to help people to change mindsets. We want to help them to be able to adapt. So now in a world of constant change, if you have a mindset that you are continually adaptive, if you have a mindset that you can solve problems, if you have a mindset that you can be flexible, the world, you walk into into your work and it's not what you anticipated. It's something different, and you can adapt. You can be flexible and say, okay, now that's the problem that I'm going to solve. You're going to be far more likely to be able to adapt. But if you think, no, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, and you cannot adapt, then you're at risk, because we know that virtually every job, especially it's dependent upon information, it's not that work isn't that different for a bricklayer nowadays. Work isn't that different from a ditch digger, but any information, any work that has information dependency is very likely to change very dramatically. And so that's what we need, is this mindset for flexibility and adaptability.
What does that mean for bureaucracies in particular? Because bureaucracies, I think by definition, seem to be, you read Max Weber, you read all the kind of the great people that kind of talked about bureaucracy and have thought deeply about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy seems to be about making sure that tomorrow looks very much like yesterday.
Yeah.
Talk to us about kind of this new world. Is it particularly challenging for bureaucracy, not just in a governmental context, but organizations that are bureaucratic in the private sector or not-for-profits?
So I mentioned cognitive biases before, and one of my favorite collaborators is Dr. Evian Gordon, and he's got the world's largest brain database, and he's one of the most amazing, most knowledgeable people about the human brain. And so he has this database with literally tens of thousands of studies, and he's sifted all this information. And so I had lunch with Evian a while back, and I said, Dr. Evian, if you could distill down everything you know about the human brain, what is the one major takeaway? And he said, oh, that's very simple. It's only 2 words: safety first. That's what our brains are optimized for. When we all used to live on the savannah or in a forest, and we saw something moving in the distance, we would have to decide very, very quickly, is that my lunch or am I its lunch? Is that good for me or is it bad for me? And we have to do that over and over again. And what we do is we have all these cognitive biases that optimize for safety. We want to protect. If we have something, we want to protect it. And so what ends up happening with bureaucracies is there's a lot of really, really valid reasons as to why bureaucracies protect. In government service, you need laws, regulations, rules, because what are the assets you're protecting? It's the assets from your citizens, and it's the citizens' lives. And so we need to protect them. And so what we do is we put these layers upon layers of bureaucracy, rules, regulations. And the challenge, unfortunately, is that, as I'm fond of saying, it's often, you think of rules, regulations, bureaucracies as having sort of there's two instruments that they use. It's either I want to encourage you to do something. You can think of that as a lubricant, that's oil, or I want to discourage you from doing something, that's glue. And so what ends up happening in bureaucracies is all these layers of glue and oil, and it's very hard sometimes to figure out what you should do. And so what does safety first encourage you to do is, oh, you're just going to focus on protecting us. You can't do that. So what happens with public service is often, amazing people who want to be able to do good in the world are attracted to public service because they want to help citizens. They want to create a better life for people. And what they're entering into is a bureaucracy with a lot of these rules. And the mindset that is encouraged is one that wants to protect. And so the result often is you have to help people to be able to adapt new mindsets in bureaucracies, to be able to think of ways that you can actually still protect those assets, but you can move fast, you can solve problems more rapidly, and you can help more people.
Now, I was going to close with, given that you're a futurist, I was going to ask you a question that I think you've answered throughout the interview, but maybe let's tie it up in a nice bow. Who owns the future? What types of characteristics will thrive in the future? What types of behaviors will not serve one well in the future?
So I think it's a little ironic that I've been given the futurist label. I was longtime chair for the future of work for Singularity University before I expanded the remit to focus on transformation. And so I often shy away from the title by instead trying to show people, well, here's the through lines that I see, and you can map it out for yourself, right? So I'll tell you, just based on past and especially recent experience, a couple of things are probably quite true. Pace and scale of change is not going to slow down. My friend Shelley Palmer, who is a futurist, he says, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. You're going to be telling your kids, I remember when we didn't stick a chip in the back of our heads and call flying Uber. So it's going to keep on changing. It's going to affect lots and lots of people more rapidly. So what we need is to, as often as possible and as much as possible, where we heavily indexed on safekeeping, which is often called a fixed mindset, which sounds kind of negative, but it's perfectly understandable. If you liked yesterday and you want today to be like, tomorrow to be like today, that's perfectly wonderful. It's just that in a world of exponential change, it doesn't always mean that we can adapt. So I suggest a couple of things. The first is practicing your mindset change. How can you develop a more flexible, a more growth-oriented mindset? How can you as an individual continually empower yourself to be able to learn new skills, solve new problems? Second is, how can you help others? Because that's how you learn, how you demonstrate, by showing others the way to be able to continually adapt. And then the third is, it's a tool set. It's very likely we're all going to have to learn to use it. If I had told you 15 years ago, there's going to be this device, we're all going to carry around this digital distraction device, and it's going to have your life on it. You're going to learn all these apps. 15 years ago, most people would have said, I don't want the thing. But everybody's got them nowadays. And it's going to be exactly the same with this new tool set. So if you can not see it so much as a disruptor, but instead the ways you can use it to learn more rapidly, to be able to solve problems in new ways, to help others to solve problems in new ways, the more you're going to be prepared for the future.
Gary Bolles, most people in life are very, very fortunate if they have one gift. You have at least two. The first is you have an insightful, curious mind. And the second is you can communicate that insight and that curiosity in ways that even dullards like myself can understand.
And the third is that I built great friendships with people like you.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us, as always, at the Canada School of Public Service. And I know that people will take many, many insights away from this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.